First question I ask everyone is, when did you know that music was going to be a part of your life?
I mean, I had been playing trombone since middle school and had listened to it for a lot. And I really think though that it wasn't until uh, college. I had been studying video there, and I had like started just a little fun band. I played mostly house shows in town, and it wasn't until I kind of started doing that a bit more and kind of realized that it felt right. And it's that weird thing to be like, yeah, you play in band, you listen to music, but I think that that's when I kind of realized like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like I don't want to not do this.
Oh yeah, when you were in that college band, like were you just doing covers, or are you trying to write original music?
It was all mostly original music. I mean, we had a handful of covers we did, but that was it was kind of it was punk adjacent is always the best way to describe how that was. We did a lot of punk songs, we did some ska songs, we did just whatever came to our heads. We had a pretty gnarly cover of TikTok by Kesha.
Oh, nice.
It was that time period, it was a relevant song.
Hey man, that does it, get people to listen. Did you have any music up or put any music out?
With that band, we never put any music out. It was just a fun project we did as friends together. It wasn't until later that I started actually recording the stuff that I did.
Yeah. And you recorded it yourself?
Yeah. Because after that, I had kind of lived a couple places across the country, and then I wound up finally getting married to my wife, Rosie, who plays in both the bands with me. And I started kind of writing and recording music with her just for fun. And we had a handful of projects that we just really enjoyed experimenting with. So that's when I started doing that. And that's a pain. It's a pain to get something sounding good by yourself. I mean, we all have the technology now, which is so crazy. It's like, you're obviously in your little room right there with a decent podcast mic, and I'm sure you can just plug in and record something real quick, and it is crazy we can all do that now.
Yeah, man. It's so wild just how far it's come. Like I mean, it's super helpful during the pandemic where you can just kind of get ideas down or whatnot. Mm-hmm. But that's really cool. So when you were writing that music, like where I guess was the goal just to perform, or was it you just writing for yourself?
So the stuff when I started with Rosie, it was mostly for myself. I mean, I put it online. I never really pushed it. I just wanted to make it and release it and do it. Trying to convince, 4 to 5 people to join you is a real challenge. And when I initially had moved, I moved to where Rosie used to live in New Mexico. It's a town called Gallup. And it's not the biggest place. I mean, there's a really big res scene out there because the reservations, Navajo and Zuni, are right kind of landlocking it. But I just didn't know anyone in the area. We only lived there for a year or so, and then we moved out to Austin. And that's actually, I went to school with Hans back in college. And so when we started Hans Gruber, it was because we knew each other, and he had mentioned, I guess he had a band that he had back in college that they had all moved together to Austin, and they're called Bearsuit Sucker Punch. And they wound up, I don't think they ever like officially just called it quits. It just one of those natural things that you start playing less and less. And I'm really good friends with all of the members of that band, but I think they all just, went on the different stages of their life.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you moved to Austin, or when you joined with Hans, did you already know how to play bass, or was it just like, how did that come about?
Yeah. So I had been playing bass on or off since high school. So I fiddled around with it. I understood it. That first band I played in college, I played bass in that. I wouldn't say I was ever fantastic, but it was definitely, I picked up bass because no one needed a trombone, at least at the time, which is actually remarkably funny when moving to Texas, because everyone wants a horn in Texas. I didn't realize, like, yeah, you got a big, not just blues scene, but even the Spanish music scene. It's like the second you can play trombone, I remember getting asked by a handful of like various cumbia or salsa, or just like even like the norteños or tejanos, where they're like, oh, sweet, you play a horn, can you help? And it's like, I have some friends that I would occasionally gig with them, but I was never great at it. But it is funny to go from no one wanted a trombone to everyone wants one, which is, it's nice. So
Yeah, for sure. Plus Austin, like, there's tons of bands, tons of diversity, so that's cool. Did you ever like jam with any like norteño or like tejano groups?
So, it's just on or off, and usually it was just with friends. I never actually went up and gigged with those types of groups, but I would, like, actually one of my good friends in town, he's I think 65 now, and he's just this master musician. And what would always happen is I'd always wind up at his house, and he'd get upset if I didn't bring my trombone. So I'd always have to bring my trombone. Rosie brought her sax. And one thing he taught us to do that has got me a lot more comfortable is that he would just expect us to play. It was like, you don't have to know the music, but you have to play along. And it was a real fun experience, because his house, the only way to describe it is every single corner, there's like instruments popping out, or you're pulling them out from under the woodworks. And so you'd be at his house at a party, and next thing you know, every person in the room has an instrument, and they're all playing and singing along at various levels of talent, but it's the magical thing. I don't know. It was.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
So like whenever you're taking on, and this is for trombone or bass or anything, like whenever you're trying to learn new music or a new style, like what's your kind of practice like mentality?
Well, let's see here. When I'm doing bass, because I think that's the one where I need to focus the hardest to do something. It always starts with just listening and getting the feel of the music, get the groove of the music, and understanding what the rhythm's like. Because especially for bass, you and the drums are kind of that, you're the backbone, you're the rhythm, and you're getting it going. And so it's so much more important to understand, for me, what are the big beats I need to hit on the bass before even understanding, okay, what's the chord progression, what's this? Because like, with bass, I would go as far to argue that like you can be hitting the root note, but if you're hitting the rhythm right, you're going to sound good. But like you can be moving all around, but if you're not hitting the rhythm, you're actually not playing the bass right. Sometimes less is more when you're doing bass, because you need to carry and lift everything.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you with that.
Yeah.
It's super important to play like what the song calls for, I guess. You can be flashy and stuff, but if it doesn't have that groove or whatever, it's just like, what's the point? What's the point of it?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So what's your mindset when you're writing music for Hans?
So for Hans Gruber, I like to experiment. And so give or take the album, I've written probably about half to 60% of the songs. And I always try to approach of what's interesting me right now, or what would be an interesting combination of musical styles, or even like what's something that we haven't done. Because I guess that you have bands that are really good at one specific style, and that's what they do, and that's a great and fun thing. But I like to have an album I'm listening to, and I don't know what I'm expecting next. And every song has a very unique feel. It's always difficult to listen to a new album and you stylistically love it, but you realize that you can't distinguish one song from the next. And I think that, unfortunately, I mean, it's a trap that I can fall into myself in writing songs and always struggling to make sure, okay, I don't want to make sure that this sounds like the thing I just wrote.
Right. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's an awesome mentality. And I mean, hearing Hans Gruber and seeing y'all play live, like I think that y'all are really good at not sounding the same like every song. Like you have
Yeah.
that down. It's your live show is amazing. Like, is there any like band or anything that you saw that like influenced you to put on like a wild show?
So I think the two bands that I saw, and I saw both of these when I was in college. It was a band called the Taxpayers.
Mhm.
They were from the Oregon area, and I had been listening for a while. They kind of did a weird jazz punk mix, and that was one of the first like just dirty. It was in a had to have been like at one point in time a convenience store, but like it was all torn out and all emptied, and that's where they set up and that's where they played, and it was they put on this wild performance, and the lead singer Rob, he just got the crowd to engage. I think that I'm not positive, but I want to say he taught like kindergarten or something, and so the way he interacted with the crowd sometimes felt like how he would interact with the kids of his class, because like he'd get you to do goofy things. It's like, okay, everyone, we're gonna be in a bobsled, and everyone line up in sets of 4, and like and you're doing stuff, and like it was such a great way to interact with a crowd, to put a performance on. So it's not just that you're making good music, but you're making this good experience for people. And I think the same thing would be with Bomb the Music Industry, which is Jeff Rosenstock's, well, not his first project, but the project before he went solo. And it's really, yeah, he captured this very DIY fun aesthetic that just was so welcoming and so unique. And those are the two, I think, shows I watched that was like, yeah, that's what I want to do. Like, I want to do something like this. I want to be cool like that. I think that's the best way to say it, is they're like, oh, these guys are cool. I want to be cool like that. And it's because they didn't really care what they looked like. They cared that they were putting on a good show, but something about that mentality and attitude and the confidence just rubbed off, and you could feel it.
Yeah, I actually, it's interesting you bring up DIY, because when I think of like y'all and even Los Curados, like I think of DIY with the music videos, like the promotion that y'all do.
Mm-hmm.
So you can definitely see the influence. Like, how do you guys go about either band like doing your music videos or the ideas?
So I actually do almost all the music videos for both bands. I do the shooting and editing, and what'll usually happen is I've come up with most of the ideas. There's been a couple that the other band members have, but you got to round everyone up and just try to get everything shot within a few hours. And sometimes I have a loose idea. Like, for example, when I did Ray Curado, I knew I wanted to have Chetos be, King Curado, and just have this vague, loose concept of what's going on. You want the band to be playing. I think it's important to have a very rhythmic aspect to what's happening. I'm personally not a huge fan of story music videos where there's not really doing anything to the beat. It's like, no, all you're doing is, acting in front of a music bed. Like, a music video to me should be rhythmic. It should be some sort of action, some sort of feel of what the music is. Actually, to be fair, I think that hip hop usually has some of the best just music video material because the beat is so important and rhythmic and going. And so almost any time you're watching a really good hip hop music video, it is just solid in there. Actually, Rihanna always does a really good job, of all people. Her and Nicki Minaj recently, like they've actually really killed it with any music video they did. And so it's real funny because I don't always, well, actually quite a bit of their songs I do like, but it's not all of my cup of tea. But they in particular, I think, are ones I think of right now that are always releasing things that are just interesting and fascinating. And obviously I can't make a video like that, but that's kind of the mindset. And when you go DIY, it's just show up at a location and just hope that none of the police show up and tell you need a release. So you just you just go. Actually, I have a new music video coming out for Hans Gruber in the next few weeks, hopefully. That was for the song we just released on the split with Sergeant Skag. It's called You're Being Watched is the song. And it's a song about this guy who's convinced that the cockroaches and insects are monitoring him. So he thinks that they're all cameras. But we actually shot that completely inside the house. I had to use some interesting techniques to put it together. We did use a little bit of models in it, and so you'll see it when it happens. But one of the cool techniques I had to do was run the video through an RF adapter to get into a TV screen. I had to use rabbit ears to actually get it. And so I actually transmitted a signal to get it because I wanted the TV aesthetic. And I didn't want to just add a filter on because you want to get the real thing. You got to do it. And so anyways, it's a lot of fun. It's fun to put those videos together. It's a lot of work. I would say putting a music video together is when you're dealing with, like for Los Corrados, 7 members, getting everyone to have a schedule where we can get, 5 or 6 hours off. And sometimes the members aren't going to be on screen the whole time. And so people are like, why am I here? And it's like, I need you in like 10 minutes, please. It can be hard, but it's fun.
Yeah. So how do you even get into that? Like into, just in general, like you're pretty creative, like writing, doing videos, recording even, like what like influenced you, or what's your like drive to just be so creative?
I don't know. It's just in my blood, I guess. I don't know what to say because I have this need to express my way of hearing or seeing things. And people who know me know that I can be fairly opinionated, but yet I still have a very large breadth of music I listen to. And so it's the idea of no one's quite putting together the vision that I have in my head, so I have to do it myself. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. So is there like a goal? Do you have like a goal, like to be like signed or to like tour, or are you just happy just doing what you're doing?
Because Hans Gruber's done a lot of touring and I really like it. I love being on tour. I love being in the van. I love crashing at random strangers' houses. You get to meet just an interesting variety of people. And that's kind of something I want to continue doing, at least for now, for the foreseeable future. I would love to get more touring with Los Corrados as well. A lot of the guys have families, though. They have wife and kids. And so it's a little tougher for them to get around. But I know that they've all been at least interested in trying to get out a bit more if we could. We've been offered some shows up in Chicago for Los Corrados, and it's just never quite worked out. It's hard to logistically when people have to be back at work on Monday, to get 7 plane tickets up there and back. So hopefully we can get them out there. I think we will.
Yeah, I feel that. Young C, we have 7 members now, and it's pretty wild. It's always crazy to get like a practice together.
Yeah.
And even shows, like some days we'll play like at Flamingo, and we'll get off at like 10 and play at 11:30 or 12 and just have to make the trip.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So what's Hans Gruber been doing during this like the pandemic?
So we actually last year we recorded 20 songs for a new album. And so it's all the songs are recorded. We're waiting to get the first draft of the mixes back. I think it should be sometime in the next few weeks. And we're hoping to release that hopefully later this year. I mean, as you know, that whole process can be a nightmare in itself because, trying to get it on vinyl, you're like, okay, well, you're looking for, 6+ months just to get those back. And that's the biggest thing we did. Obviously, we released the 7-inch last Friday, so the 5th of March. And that was one thing we had in the works for a while. And that was a lot of fun. Sergeant Scagnetti is the band that was also on there with us. And they've been around since the 90s on or off. And Chris has known them since he was actually in high school. So it was really interesting to be able to, for him, play with this, put on a record with this band that he played with in high school. So it's like, hey, cool. Like, we,
made it.
Yeah. So it's, I don't know, it's all interesting. I'm trying to think. That's the big things. Lord willing, we should be playing, I think, Fest out in November. And we're kind of waiting to hear back on 1 or 2 other festivals to see what is still happening or not happening. Because we were on last year, we were supposed to play 3 different festivals and they all 3 got canceled. So we're waiting to see which ones are saying we're doing it again this year or we got to push off another year. Right.
Well, do you have any advice for like bands that are trying to get into festivals? Like what do y'all do, or how do you get into like festivals or booking bigger shows?
I mean, when you're doing festivals, it's just, you got to find the right person to email and you got to get lucky. That's how it always seems. And I mean, if you have a good connection, a good friendship, or if you have any friends who are in bands who are in there, they can usually point you to the right person and at least put a good word in for you. I'm not, I think Chris was the one who initially got us booked onto Fest. But from what I remember, I think it's more or less that we had toured with a couple of bands that had played Fest in the past. So we were able to at least be introduced as a person because we knew these bands. Yeah. And then after you start getting on one of them, it's actually a lot easier to get on the rest because a lot of people will go to multiple festivals or I know Guillaume up at Pooza had saw us at Fest. And so originally we were going to be playing Pooza last year and we got on essentially because he saw us. And we then emailed him and did that. When you're getting bigger shows, that's just in Texas, it just feels like a crapshoot. Yeah. You got, depending on the size of the band coming through, a lot of them don't want local openers, at least in Austin. And the ones that do, we have a good connection and friendship with Angela for Los Curados. And so a lot of times you'll have certain Latin groups come through that, are from Central South America and play ska or reggae. And we're kind of one of the few bands directly in town that play the style. And so we get handed a couple of those. And it's, you just gotta ask. You gotta ask, you gotta beg, and you gotta show up, not just show up to the gigs, but show up like put on a show,
Yeah.
impress people. Yeah.
Hell yeah. Fest, like, I feel like Fest is a really great fest for like ska bands. I see a lot of ska bands, like newer ska bands posting. Like, do you have
Oh yeah.
you have any like new favorites? Like for, I've seen like Fourth Wave or New Tone or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. I mean, we've actually played with a lot of them. In terms of the ones kind of up and coming, uh, the stuff that I think is Gray Matter out of Michigan. I thought they were doing something really interesting with what they were putting together for ska. Catbite had a really good kind of traditional two-tone sound for what they did, and the lead singer, she does a great job. I think she has an interesting voice. Trying to think the other ones around. I mean, for us, we have a lot of the bands that we're really good friends with, like the Big News out of Oklahoma City, and as well as La Chapuza down in El Paso. They're kind of all doing a good sound. I mean, for me personally, I like that La Chapuza or the South Central ska sound, some of that Mexican ska sound, where it's just that something about that drive and insanity, and depending on the band, the slightly out of tune horns, just putting together that one horn line, and it's an aesthetic that, like, depending on the day, will drive you crazy. But then sometimes you're listening to that sound, and I say the South Central sound. I don't know if you're familiar with the South LA, the backyard scene. You've probably heard the bands, like I think is it Ocho Calacas kind of does it, and what are some of the other big ones that have kind of been doing it? Well, for us, there's a band called Natural Disaster Ska Core out of Juarez. And there's just something about, like, it's like these screams or these pig squeals or these yells mixed in with just a very flat and the horns just slightly out of tune with each other. Well, live at least. I don't know. It's funny that you can't put your finger on why it's appealing to not have it perfectly right, but it just puts a charm. And that scene has actually been going on for 20, 30 years. Mm-hmm. But I think that's, to me, I'm starting to see some of those new bands come out that sound like that, and I'm beginning to get used to that scene. And I think that Spanish scene hasn't been tapped into in the United States. And that's what I'm most excited about, is when I hear those, when I play with those bands, it's like, man, this is something, at least for a United States audience like myself, I hadn't heard before, and I get excited about. And I think that as much as I do like a lot of the stuff that the Bad Time Records is putting out, there's an appeal to some of that, the Mexican and kind of Southwestern U.S. ska sound that hasn't been tapped into yet.
Yeah, absolutely. That first band, I don't know how to say their name, but I probably heard them from maybe something you posted, real like hardcore. I think it sounds good because it's real like punk, and it's just like, yeah, they don't care, kind of just gonna play.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's pretty wild. Did you ever hear that band, Folly?
Oh, I fucking love Folly. Man, actually, Best of the Worst new album that came out recently, it reminded me of Folly a lot, and in a good way. I think they did a great job kind of doing that with that kind of metalcore mixed with ska. And yeah, because Folly had, I think it was Don't Shoot the Piano Player, like starts with that. And just like this super dissonant, and just those breakdowns you'll just murder someone to. Yeah. Then bust into that ska. I'm glad you mentioned Folly. A lot of people, because they were around for a long time, I think, up in the Northeast, but just didn't seem like they made a huge impact on the scene, which is too bad, because they were doing that metalcore or hardcore mixed with ska thing, just that insanity.
Yeah, I think that blew my mind the first time I heard that song. Just breaking into the ska. Wild. Cool, man. Well, just thank you for talking. It's been
Yeah.
awesome. I guess before we go, we'll just do a little gear. What are you playing right now?
So my bass, I've had for 10 plus years. It's a Epiphone viola, which is kind of that Paul McCartney ripoff. And it's not that it has the best sound. It's not that it has the worst sound, but it's the most comfortable to put your hand around. Like I can just move my hand, no problems when I play it. When I go in the studio, I'm usually just kind of using whatever's going to sound best, but there's something about having that thing on stage. And because it looks kind of silly, it's kind of goofy looking, and no one's expecting, some fucking hardcore rhythms out of someone up here like this. And I actually have it's a Trace Elliott stack I use. I want to say I paid like $200 for it.
Yeah.
And it was some guy out of San Marcos, I guess went to college there, was selling it to get rid of it. There was one small thing I had to fix, and it puts out some power. It's loud, and there's something about it that just, God, it weighs a fucking ton. That part sucks. That's not fun on tour. It's not fun to drag that around, but yeah. My trombone's just a pea shooter with an Olds Ambassador. I don't know. I'm not a big gearhead. I think a lot of people they are always searching for that perfect gear. I just kind of search for what works and what feels right. Obviously I don't want a bad sound, but like I've never been that just perfecting thousands of dollars on gear to get the right thing, especially because half the time you wind up to a club and it doesn't matter what you have anyways. It's going to sound like shit going through their like, whatever broken PA system they have. So
yeah, absolutely, man. I agree with you too. Like you can make anything sound good. Like it's really up to you. If you play good, then it doesn't matter what you're playing out of.
Yeah.
I recommend a Fender Rumble. I switched to that. It's 35 pounds and it's loud.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you're ever looking to get new equipment, it sounds good. And you can like carry it just with your pinky if you want. Maybe not your pinky.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's good. Especially for tours. I'll probably be good to get something like that.
Yeah, for sure. Dude, again, thank you so much for talking to me.
Absolutely.
I'm glad to have you. I hope we can jam soon. Play some shows, something. But yeah, just thank you. You have a great day, and I'll talk to you later.
All right. Take care, man.
Later.